Imagine you're waking up in a sun-drenched, beautifully restored apartment in Lisbon's historic Alfama district. You open the traditional wooden shutters, and the Atlantic breeze carries the scent of roasted coffee and sea salt. You stroll down cobblestone streets that have stood for centuries, grab a perfectly flaky pastel de nata and a rich espresso for just €2, and open your laptop at a quiet kiosk. You're earning a low six-figure US salary, paying a mere fraction of what you would for a shoebox in New York, London, or San Francisco. You are living the ultimate European dream. Life, by almost every metric available to you, is practically perfect. But let's pan the camera down for a second. Let's look at the reality hiding just outside the frame of your Instagram story. The barista who just served you that espresso, they are making around €850 a month. They live over an hour away, likely in a damp, windowless room in a crowded suburban block, because their childhood neighborhood, the one their grandparents grew up in, was bought up by an anonymous offshore LLC to be flipped into the very short-term rental you were currently sitting in. Over the last decade, Portugal has been aggressively, almost desperately marketed as the California of Europe, a cheap, sunny, safe haven for expats, digital nomads, and wealthy retirees. But behind the glossy reels and the endless travel blogs lies a terrifyingly different economic reality. We are talking about a country where the average wage has been essentially paralyzed for a decade, where housing prices have exploded by over 120% nationwide and nearly 190% in Lisbon since 2015, and where the youth are fleeing the country so fast the government is practically begging them to stay. Today, we're tearing down the pastel-colored wallpaper. No hype, no travel vlogger fluff, just cold, hard, verifiable economics. I'm going to show you how a country structurally engineered its own crisis, the brutal math behind the local cost of living, and why the cheap European paradise is actually a mirage built on the backs of the local working class. This is the real truth about Portugal's economy in 2026. To really understand what happened to Portugal, we have to go back to the scene of the crime, 2011. Portugal was functionally bankrupt. The country was suffocating under a massive sovereign debt crisis and was forced to take a €78 billion bailout from the Troika, the European Union, the ECB, and the IMF. The terms were brutal. Austerity was the law of the land. The country was desperate for foreign capital. They needed cash, and they needed it yesterday. So they rolled out one of the most brilliant and ultimately destructive marketing campaigns in modern economic history. Enter the Golden Visa in 2012, followed later by the D7 Passive Income Visa and the D8 Digital Nomad Visa. The strongest argument for these programs is that they actually worked. At the time, Portugal had to attract foreign direct investment to survive. The Golden Visa program alone brought in roughly €7.3 billion over the next decade. Urban decay was reversed. Derelict buildings in Lisbon and Porto that had been rotting since the 1970s were suddenly renovated into luxury apartments. It created construction jobs, boosted tourism, and literally saved the country's balance sheet. But here is where we have to explain the mechanics of what happens when you plug a fire hose of global wealth into a tiny, highly regulated local housing market. It comes down to a concept called geographic arbitrage. Let's look at the math. A remote software engineer from San Francisco moves to Lisbon. They bring a salary of $120,000 a year. To them, paying €1,500 a month for a centrally located, renovated apartment is a massive bargain. It's roughly 15% of their gross income. They're thrilled. But the median salary in Portugal hovers around €1,200 to €1,500 a month before taxes. For the local Portuguese professional, say a nurse with 10 years of experience or a high school teacher, that exact same €1,500 rent represents 100 to 120% of their take-home pay.
It is mathematically impossible for them to compete in a free market when global purchasing power competes for the exact same fixed asset as local purchasing power. The local loses every single time. And the numbers in 2026 are downright apocalyptic. According to recent data from real estate platforms like Idealista, the number of homes for sale in Portugal under 200,000 euros has plummeted by 73% nationwide over the past 5 years. In major cities like Lisbon, Faro, and Funchal, affordable housing for the middle class has essentially vanished. Meanwhile, the supply of luxury homes priced over 500,000 euros jumped by 42%. Foreign buyers in Lisbon are currently paying a median of nearly 5,000 euros per square meter, almost double what domestic buyers can afford. Now, if you spend any time on expat forums, you'll hear the defense. Foreigners only make up a single-digit percentage of total real estate transactions. You can't blame us for the whole crisis. And mathematically, that's partially true. Foreigners aren't the only reason Portugal's housing market broke. The real villain in the shadows is Portugal's suffocating bureaucracy and archaic zoning laws. Even as demand skyrocketed, Portugal failed to build. Why? Because getting a building permit in Portugal is an extreme sport. Municipalities face 12 to 18-month delays just to issue basic permits, bogged down by staff shortages, complex regulations, and legal disputes. Believe it or not, more than half of Portugal's urban land sits completely empty and undeveloped, fenced in by legal battles or outdated municipal restrictions. Developers, faced with high taxes and endless red tape, only want to build high-margin luxury condos for the international market. They have zero financial incentive to build affordable housing for the Portuguese middle class. By late 2023, the government panicked. They realized they had created a monster. Under the Mais Habitación, More Housing Bill, they banned real estate purchases from qualifying for the Golden Visa. But the genie was already out of the bottle. Today, in 2026, the Golden Visa still exists, but the money has simply shifted. Instead of buying apartments, wealthy foreigners are dumping 500,000 euros into Portuguese venture capital and private equity funds. Open-ended funds like the Optimized Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund exploded to over $350 million in assets by early 2026, delivering wild 25% returns. Meanwhile, the immigration system has completely buckled. The newly formed immigration agency, IMA, inherited a catastrophic backlog. Currently, there are roughly 50,000 pending Golden Visa applications. The wait times are so absurd that people are spending years in bureaucratic limbo. The digital Nomad Mirage was brilliant for the Portuguese state's tax revenues, but it acted as an accelerant on a structural fire. It created a two-tier society, one for the global citizen and another for the local servant.
Imagine you're 24 years old. You've just spent the last 5 years grinding through a grueling mechanical engineering or aerospace degree at the prestigious Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon. You speak fluent English. You know how to code. You are the prime human capital any country would kill for. You sit down at a desk in a slick, modern glass office park for your very first post-grad job interview. The hiring manager looks at your flawless resume, smiles warmly, and slides an offer letter across the table. You look down. The offer is for 1,150 euros a month. Gross! After taxes and social security, your take-home pay is roughly 900 euros. You silently do the math. A single room in a shared apartment on the outskirts of Lisbon costs 550 euros. Groceries will run you 250 euros. Utilities and a transit pass take another 100 euros. Congratulations, young engineer. You have exactly 0 euros left over. Your globally competitive degree has earned you the exact same purchasing power as a teenager working the fryer at a local McDonald's. Welcome to the defining macroeconomic tragedy of modern Portugal, the catastrophic brain drain fueled by severe wage compression. To be fair, the Portuguese government will aggressively defend its record on wages. If you look at official press releases, politicians will proudly point out that the national minimum wage has grown significantly. In 2015, the minimum wage was a dismal €505 a month. By 2026, it has been pushed toward €870. The government pats itself on the back, claiming they're lifting the working class out of poverty. But here is where we need to look at the brutal mechanics of wage compression. When a government aggressively raises the minimum wage floor, but the overall economy is not generating enough high-value, high-productivity growth to raise the ceiling, everything gets squeezed together in the middle. Because Portugal's corporate sector is notoriously suffocated by high corporate taxes and a heavy reliance on low-margin industries like tourism, businesses simply cannot afford to increase specialized salaries at the same rate. The data reveals a terrifying reality. The gap between the minimum wage and the average wage is practically disappearing. In 2010, only about 11% of the workforce earned the minimum wage. Today, nearly 25 to 30% of the working population is clustered at or just barely above the absolute legal minimum. You have a society where a senior accountant with 10 years of experience might be earning €1,350 a month, while the entry-level clerk they're managing earns €870. The financial reward for upskilling, getting a master's degree, or taking on immense responsibility is practically non-existent. And if you do manage to break out of this trap and secure a high salary, the tax man is waiting for you with a very big hammer. Let's say you hustle and land a job paying €3,000 a month. In London or Berlin, that's a starter wage. But in the eyes of the Portuguese tax authority, the Finanças, you are practically Jeff Bezos. Portugal has one of the most aggressively progressive personal income tax systems in Europe relative to its low average incomes. By the time you factor in the mandatory 11% Social Security and the steep brackets, the government vacuums up a massive chunk of every extra euro you earn. Because of this toxic cocktail, high housing, flatlining wages, and punishing taxes, the Portuguese youth have made a highly rational economic calculation. They are leaving. We aren't just talking about a few kids on a gap year. We are talking about a demographic hemorrhage. An estimated 30% of all young people born in Portugal between the ages of 15 and 39 currently live outside the country. They are fleeing to Switzerland, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. Why wouldn't they? That same mechanical engineer offered €1,150 in Lisbon can take a 2-hour flight to Munich and instantly command €5,000 with a lower relative cost of living. The Portuguese state spends hundreds of millions of euros educating its youth, funding public universities, and training world-class doctors, only to immediately export that value to Northern Europe for free. It is a massive, subsidized wealth transfer from a poor Southern European nation to the richest economies on the continent. Portugal is left with an aging population and a critical shortage of healthcare workers and engineers.
Imagine you're a local Portuguese entrepreneur in 2026. You've secured €2 million in capital. You face a critical choice. Option A, start a biotech firm. You'll navigate one of the highest corporate tax codes in the OECD, battle 18 months of red tape for an R&D grant, and struggle to find engineers who haven't already fled to Munich. Option B, buy a crumbling apartment block in Porto, slap on some white paint and exposed brick, and list it on Airbnb for €250 a night. If you want a guaranteed return, you choose option B every time. This is the invisible mechanic strangling Portugal, the catastrophic misallocation of capital. Portugal has become an economic monoculture addicted to low value-added tourism. While tourism saved the country after the 2011 crisis, now accounting for nearly 20% of GDP, it created a brutal productivity trap. In economics, productivity isn't about how hard you sweat, it's the value generated per hour. A software engineer in Berlin writing code for millions generates massive value. A waiter in the Algarve serving a €15 plate of sardines has a mathematical ceiling. No matter how fast they run, the profit margin on a beer and a sandwich cannot pay a $3,000 salary. By 2026, Portugal has morphed into a giant, beautifully tiled boutique hotel for foreigners. The oil of Portugal is its sunshine, but like Dutch disease, this resource has inflated local costs while decoupling them from local wages. To keep the machine running, Portugal now relies on a massive migrant underclass from South Asia and Brazil, willing to accept the $870 minimum wage while living in squalid, overcrowded conditions. It is a modern feudal system disguised as a digital nomad paradise. The social contract in Portugal is breaking down in real time. Historically, the Serviço Nacional de Saúde, or SNS, was a global triumph, but in 2026 it is trapped in a pay-as-you-go death spiral. A public system relies on the taxes of the young and healthy to fund the elderly, but as the youth flee, the demographic pyramid has inverted. Today, for every 100 young people, there are 180 elderly citizens. The math simply doesn't work. To plug the gap, the state freezes the only variable it can control, public sector wages. After a decade of training, a specialist doctor in the public sector takes home roughly €2,000 a month. Naturally, they leave. This creates a terrifying reality where 1.5 million citizens, 15% of the population, have no family doctor. This collapse has forced the middle class into a double tax. You pay high Social Security for a broken public service, then you're forced to spend another €100 a month on private insurance just to get a basic surgery. You're essentially paying twice for a human right, while wealthy expats bypass the rot entirely in five-star private clinics, blogging about how affordable Portuguese healthcare is compared to the US. Drive across Portugal today, and you'll see world-class infrastructure. Since 1986, Portugal has received tens of billions in EU structural funds. But the real custo Portugal, the cost of Portugal, isn't about the roads, it's the suffocating friction of the bureaucracy. Opening a manufacturing plant in Portugal can take 2 to 5 years just for environmental and municipal permits. Each entity operates on an agonizingly slow timeline, indifferent to the fact that your seed capital is burning away. If you survive the permits, the taxman arrives. Portugal's effective corporate tax rate, including state surcharges, is a massive deterrent to scaling. Small businesses are structurally discouraged from growing. They stay small to avoid the complexity and the state surcharge. The result? Portugal has become an EU subsidy junkie. The economy is no longer geared toward industrial competition, but toward capturing the next round of Brussels recovery funds. This money flows into public projects, more roads, more digital seminars, but it rarely reaches the productive private sector that creates high-paying jobs. Until the government makes it more profitable to build a tech company than to flip a hostel, the country will remain trapped, a beautiful playground for visitors, but an economic agonizing reality for those who call it home. Portugal in 2026 is a masterpiece of marketing, but a cautionary tale of economics. When a nation prioritizes the global tourist over the local professional, it doesn't build a future, it builds a theme park. But this isn't the first time an empire traded its structural integrity for short-term illusions. If you want to see how fake money and economic fraud destroyed the greatest power in history, you need to watch our deep dive into the fraud that killed Rome. History is repeating itself. Don't miss the signs. Subscribe to Finance Unfolded, and let's uncover the truth together. I'll see you in the next one.